Have you ever wondered how small molecule drugs are discovered? As it turns out, it's a long and arduous process, one that has significantly changed over the course of the past century. On average, out of 5,000 to 10,000 compounds that enter the drug discovery phase, only one may receive FDA approval after a 10 to 15 year process, costing over $2.5 billion. Well, if you include the cost of failures anyway. But what if we could leverage the latest groundbreaking technologies to make it faster, better, and cheaper to develop drugs? Artificial intelligence will get us there. Hi, I'm Doug Nisanoff, Managing Director and Founder of Intelligence Ventures. Welcome to another episode of Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare, the Intelligence Roundtable. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare, the Intelligence Roundtable. I'm your host, Doug Nisanoff, Managing Director of Intelligence Ventures. As many of you guys already know, I identify as a biotechie. And if you don't know what a biotechie is, that's okay. It's just a really nerdy way of saying I love biotech, drug discovery, and getting healthcare to patients who really need it the most. Now, I'm not a scientist who's actually gone and discovered medicines myself. I've always been in the dark side of the industry. I worked in New York City and worked in investor relations in the beginning of my career, and pretty much worked in investor relations and market intelligence ever since then. So when it came time to form Intelligence Ventures, we were looking for folks who really had an understanding and a deep knowledge of how does a drug get discovered and how do you get it to the patients. Turns out it's a really, really complicated process, and it requires a lot of time and dedication to make it happen. So we were very careful to select advisors for our advisory board at Intelligence Ventures that really understood this process and have a crazy good track record. In today's episode, we're going to feature one of those people. So Gavin Hirst is a 30-year drug discovery veteran, and he's currently the chief scientific officer at Atomwise. They're a leading AI-enabled drug discovery enterprise on a mission to find a new way to discover medicines. So Gavin's career is so cool. It spans periods at both large multinational pharmaceutical companies such as Johnson & Johnson, Takeda, and AbbVie, in addition to smaller biotechnology ventures. He applied his expertise to bring multiple small molecule drug candidates to the clinic and beyond. So he spanned 5 different therapeutic areas, particularly in oncology and immunology. Over the last 2 decades of his career, Gavin has been focused on leveraging predictive tools, such as AI in concert with structure-based drug discovery, to bring the highest quality assets to the clinic to impact patient lives. If anyone knows how to get drugs from discovery to the patient, it's this guy. So let's bring him on. All right, so let's welcome our guest, Dr. Hirst. Welcome to the show.
Great. Good to be here, Doug.
So maybe you can start by just telling us a little bit about your journey in AI and drug discovery and what motivates your work in the field.
Yes, I've been doing drug discovery for 30 years, and midway through my career, I found myself really attracted to one theme, and that was using predictive tools in drug discovery. How can we use them, even in the early days of predictive tools? And I found more and more that the value of these really helps you make choices. Sometimes I say drug discovery is a little like poker. The better choices you make, the better odds you generate for yourselves, the more likely you are to be successful. Pocket aces will always outperform an off-suited 2-7. And so in drug discovery, if you can apply predictive tools, and this is going back to the early stages of my career, that say, make this not that, and I'm talking drug discovery, not drug development, make this not that, because that's a higher probability of success molecule. You're always going to stack the odds in your favor. And so with that, throughout my career, I found myself more and more moving to companies with more muscle in that domain. And now moving to the era of full-throated AI and machine learning drug discovery is for me fascinating and incredibly impactful area. And I think about it in terms of quality and not speed. And what do I mean by that? Going back to my earlier comments, not all drugs are created equal. There are high quality drugs that have very high expectations of performance in the clinics, and there are ones that are me too's, look similar to other people's drugs that perform mediocrely like maybe other people's drugs do. So it's all about, for me, is about quality and how the application of artificial intelligence can help you make high quality choices.
And it's my understanding that artificial intelligence has the ability to help speed up the drug discovery process. And it could even help some folks have what one might call a royal flush in their Rolodex, you know? Um, so what I'm going to do is I want to show a chart here. And it really explains the clinical trial process quite well in the drug discovery process. And for those of you who are tuning in, maybe only through audio, don't worry. We'll paint the picture pretty clearly. For those of you who are watching through the video, you can check it out here. So if you've ever walked through a university, you've probably seen folks, maybe some scientists, who are doing some research. You have a lot of lab assistants who are sitting there and trying to get their credits maybe, but ultimately, a lot of them are working towards developing new medicine, and the drug discovery process starts quite broad. It can be thousands of drugs. Only a few of those candidates actually make it to preclinical trials. When I say preclinical trials, that usually involves animals, so testing in animals such as mice or anything like that. Something that just has a shorter lifespan, but at the same time, you can watch it progress really quickly. Whereas humans, maybe it probably will take a little longer, right? So if that works well, only a few of them make it to the IND submission stage. At that stage, then they can kick off clinical trials. So when I say IND, that means that they are submitting an application to the FDA to be able to put the drug in humans. It starts in phase 1 clinical trials, which is really for safety and pharmacokinetics, at least outside of oncology. And this is only tens of volunteers, as you can see here in the chart. And a few of them make it to phase 2, which is the efficacy stage. Here we start to see a lot more volunteers come on through. Comes into the hundreds. We want to see, really, does the drug actually work, right? Then it takes us to phase number 3, which that's where you're really broadening your patient base to thousands of patients. At this point, about 7 to 8 years have already passed. And tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions, have been spent just to get to this point. It is extremely difficult to get here. If you think it's actually going to make it from this point, well, then you can submit an NDA or a BLA to the FDA where they review it. And of the tens of thousands of drug candidates that started in the basic research in the beginning of this chart, only one of them is going to make it to the FDA approval process. So this just shows you how difficult it is. So that kind of helps me transition into the role of AI. So Gavin, how has AI transformed the drug discovery process in recent years?
Yeah, Doug, that's a really important question. It's clear over the last decade or so that the organizations who really use the muscle of AI and machine learning to advance drug discovery projects, one of the hallmarks of those organizations, AI efforts, has been their ability to get to the real human experiment quite quickly. And so progressing from early hit identification, which is at the thousands where you had on your earlier chart, through to getting into phase 2A, where you're really getting into actual patients. That has been a far more rapid process than it has been in the past. The challenge has been, though, there's been a number of recent reports in blogs and in news outlets about the performance of such drugs in the clinic. And so a number of organizations have taken drugs to the clinic, and they've somewhat underperformed against the expectations. And I think that is one of the challenges. Getting to the clinic more quickly doesn't guarantee a higher quality molecule that will get through the clinic and exact the pharmacology and biology in the species you care about. And so that drive for speed has had some compromise on quality, in my opinion. So a number of organizations, and this goes back to my earlier discussion about using probability, using predictive tools, using AI and machine learning. not to make quicker choices, which it obviously does, but to make higher quality choices, such that when you deliver a molecule to the clinic, its likelihood of performing superior to either other molecules against the same mechanism of action or even the potential of being first in class. So it increases your likelihood of being best in class, and that's valuable for patients, of course. Now you've got something superior to what they could take, or it increases your odds of being first in class because you've got a higher quality molecule surviving all those clinical trials, yet again bringing value for a patient. The fact that you're first in class tells you no patients currently have access to that mechanism of action to treat their disease.
Yeah. And like you said, just because a molecule or a drug makes it to clinical trials faster doesn't mean it's necessarily better. And
Exactly right.
yeah, I anticipate that it will get better as time goes on. AI is still, I'd still say it's rather early, right? I mean, sure, it's been around for 60 years, but we just hit that nexus or that pivotal point where now it's achieved critical mass and it's starting to really gain traction. And so even drugs that were, because it takes time just to get to clinical trials, it takes like
Right.
2, 3 years maybe. And so by the time a drug that was discovered 2 to 3 years ago that was discovered using AI is then put into clinical trials, think about all the improvements that have happened since then. And
Yeah.
so any successes that we're seeing in clinical trials right now are really coming from where we were 2 to 3 years ago, not today. Um, and so I guess maybe you could share some success stories or breakthroughs in drug discovery that were made possible through AI.
Yeah, I want to pick up on your point. You're absolutely right. One thing that is a hallmark of the of companies that applying AI and machine learning is they learn quickly, uh, and they have the capability of refining models based on outcomes at any point down that path, including experience in the clinic. And depending on the focus of the organization, that can quite quickly be brought into to modify the approaches. So I don't doubt that the successes going forward will be superior to the successes so far. It, I think first and foremost, the successes have been getting to the clinic. Clearly, getting to the clinic has been very successful. A number of organizations have been able to do it. So that's a proof point of the application of AI and machine learning. And we shouldn't lose sight of that. That we have that the standard bearer, if you like, getting to the clinic. There's a number of organizations have really been quite prolific in that space. Like XCNC has been one that comes to mind. Of course, they've got a number of clinical candidates, but they still have some challenges in the clinic. But even to get there, I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I've been very fortunate that I've been involved in probably a dozen programs to take molecules to the clinic. But that's just for successes. The number of programs that fail, the graphic you had earlier about the attrition, that's just for one program. So you start a program on, I'll choose a very popular target, on 2. You may make 3,000 molecules to get to the clinic. But 10 other programs, you may make 3,000 molecules, none of which make it to the program. I mean, the odds are a little bit better than that, but that graphic is one successful graphic. There are many failures. So getting to the clinic is hard. And so we should absolutely celebrate the successes of getting to the clinic using the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Absolutely. I remember when we first met, we were discussing, and you told me how you've gone about a dozen programs, through clinical trials from discovery and even one through approval.
Correct.
And I think you were joking. You were like, some people will be like, only one? Really? And it's amazing. What are you talking about? Only one. People don't realize how difficult it is to get to that finish line, and there's not a lot of people who can say that they've gotten 12 to the clinic, period. A lot of folks spend their entire careers in academia or starting companies, and a lot of them don't make it. So congratulations to you. That's really a big impact.
Sure.
Of course. In what ways is AI reshaping impact in the pharmaceutical industry beyond just discovery?
There have been a number of organizations, large pharma and small biotechs, that really realize the value of getting the most value out of ongoing clinical trials, or even terminated clinical trials. We talked about this loop of feeding back knowledge to an earlier stage. And so many organizations have invested incredibly heavily in AI and machine learning to extract the most valuable information out of their clinical trials, to help them get a better understanding of where their drugs could perform in alternative settings or additional settings, if you like. And being able to use AI and machine learning to, if you like, fill out empty data sets within the information that they have. And that's one of the real values of AI machine learning, that ability to predict a box in an XY plot, if you like, where it should sit to really inform people. So this has been a real large area of investment in all big pharma, and even smaller biotechs are leaning heavily into that space. And Silicon Medicines in particular, and Benevolent, have leaned very heavily into the application of AI and machine learning into drug development as distinct from drug discovery. And so the ability to shape and impact a clinical trial design and get it right, get the patient stratification, patient population chosen correctly by in utilizing AI and machine learning is proving to be a very powerful tool.
So fun fact, I actually started my career as a clinical research coordinator.
Wow.
And I worked in dermatology and psychiatry studies back in Tampa. And recruitment was difficult, for sure, right? I mean, if you think about going to patients and saying, hey, we have a schizophrenia study, do you want to be in it? It can be insulting if they're not, schizophrenic, right? But you can also think about just the actual protocol itself. There are so many amendments that go into a clinical trial protocol. And AI can certainly help us get it right the first time and reduce the amount of amendments that are needed and optimize the patient experience and cut down costs for pharmaceutical companies to run the trial and ultimately get the drug through the finish line. One of the things that I want to talk about are the ethical considerations for AI in drug discovery. We've been seeing a lot of buzz around that. So the G7 met and it was a hot button issue, it was regulating artificial intelligence. We have seen some big name celebrities and entrepreneurs like Elon Musk who are petitioning to slow down progress. But yet we've seen a lot of the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare industry really adopting this more so with open arms than other industries. I was talking to somebody who had attended the Yale CEO Summit, and this is like some of the top CEOs in the country. CEO of Apple was there, CEO of Google, I heard, was there. This is also what I've heard. I'm not sure if they can validate this or not. And they talked about AI for about 2 to 3 hours. A lot of the discussion was, some of the more cheery, the use cases and how we can make society better. And then there was also the doomsday situations, right? How's it going to take over the world? And, we're all screwed. I don't think that's the case, but, fun topic. So I guess, what are some of the ethical considerations that you think of that come with the use of AI in drug discovery?
The application of AI in drug discovery, I think first and foremost, one of the significant upsides is it's very clear that you're applying it and there's a direct impact on the human race. But that imperative to impact the quality and health of people, the quality of their lives, I think that's quite a different discussion than developing self-driving cars, for example. So you may have different ethical frameworks, and I would love to sit in a self-driving car, but on a straight road with no else on the road. So color me a little cynical. But I think the ethical constraints and considerations there are quite different than in drug discovery, because ultimately the proof is in the impact on the patients. And there's a regulatory framework there anyway. I don't mean an AI regulatory framework, but there's a framework there to test the validity of the quality of the drug you're about to apply to patients. Um, and so I think it's a very different ethical framework than just the broader question of generative AI. And so when I think about it, maybe I'm a little naive. I just think about the quality of the impact to patients, and that for me doesn't conjure up any ethical considerations at its simplest.
Yeah, it's well said. Really, and it's actually great because in our last episode when we spoke with Jose Pedro Almeida, he said the same thing, which is patients need to be coming first. When it doesn't matter if you are AI data specialist, tech guy, you're a brilliant scientist who's gotten drugs to clinical trials and drugs approved. Doesn't matter if you're a physician. The ultimate goal and what unifies a lot of people in our industry is the patients, and it's important to never lose sight of that. And I guess on the topic of patients, I mean, how do you envision the future of AI in healthcare and drug discovery? And what does the future look like for patients?
I think the future for patients looks absolutely outstanding. Going back to my earlier comment about patient selection and patient stratification and the challenges that come with that. I see a world where you're almost handpicking your patients because you've got the ability, leveraging AI and machine learning, saying this patient will respond, this one won't. And there's a number of inputs you can put in to ask that question to get that answer. But AI helps you sort through that. So I see a world where that's a possibility, saying that, we have this drug that's signaling through this mechanism. We're doing a phase 2A trial. This is the enrollment criteria. And those are very different 10 years from now to what they would be today, because we're able to apply so much more information to pre-select the right patient population. And that correct patient population, assuming the drug is efficacious, that also helps you subsequently for the application outside of the clinic into the, once approved, the patients that would respond most effectively. You can define those with far more precision. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. Within the discovery area, we've talked about getting to the clinic fast, and we've talked about high quality assets getting there. And at the moment, those appear to be orthogonal. So there's a number of assets that have got to the clinic quickly and have seemed to have underperformed. And so that need for speed has probably compromised quality. And at the moment, the drive for quality takes away from the speed. It's that, they're obviously oppositional in the current state. I see a future state where those come together such that you can get the highest quality molecules to the clinic in a quicker time as possible. And so what that does, you mentioned 2 to 3 years, more in the 3 years time frame, I would say. Mm-hmm. If you could cut 66% out of that, take 2 years out of the time it takes to go from initiating a new program to getting a development candidate about to go into IND, that's impacting patients 2 years earlier. And who wouldn't want that? I mean, that's just a remarkable feat. And I see that in the future. We have to figure out how to get there. And all the AI companies that I've interfaced and talked to, by that I mean non-pharma companies, they're really striving to do exactly that. How can we bring together speed and quality, deliver the highest value to patients?
For sure. And so at Intelligence Ventures, we've met with so many startups that are AI-enabled drug discovery. And folks have asked me time and time again, what do you think, what is the lowest hanging fruit for AI application in healthcare? I always have the same two answers, which is one, AI-enabled medical imaging, right? You can train a model and say, okay, this is a dog, this is a blueberry muffin, label them. You can do the same thing with broken bones, right? Or with pictures from CAT scans or radiology, or hey, do you see any tumors in this scan, right? So there's a lot of companies that are going after it. I've seen about, I think there were about 90 FDA submissions for radiology enabled AI devices just last year alone. But the other answer that I always give is AI enabled drug discovery. Perhaps I'm biased. I come from the biotech industry and really enjoy it. But we've seen some great companies that are cutting down the risk for patients. So, clinical trials. Imagine a diagnostic test or some way you can profile a patient where you can look at it and using AI and say, look, based on the data we're seeing, there's a correlation of patients not doing so well with genomic data like yours. We don't recommend you do this clinical trial. And that's super impactful. And it saves a lot of money, a lot of headache, and of course, lives. From a time perspective, it cuts down, not only does it get things there faster, from a finance perspective, a lot of these companies run out of cash in certain macroeconomic environments. Right now is a terrible time for a lot of biopharma companies. So if they're able to get to clinical trials 2 years faster than before, it could spare them from having to shut down due to poor macroeconomic environments, and thus get a life-saving drug to the finish line to the patient. It's a crazy time right now, which is why we're so bullish on it. But I guess for a lot of the startups that are out there and that are tuning in, Gavin, what advice would you give to these startups and emerging companies in the AI and healthcare sector?
Yeah, I think emerging companies, industry, the drug discovery space, is defining clear differentiation. What are you going to do? You mentioned the bear market, the capital markets, as you said, are in the toilet at the moment. So I think that's often forgotten. You never get to run the critical experiment because the dollar signs turn to zero, and that is terrible for the industry, that you're not able to do that. But one of the features to be able to generate enough capital to allow you to do that, certainly speed is part of that. But to be able to find a differentiating strategy that will attract investments to allow you to run that experiment, that would be the guidance I would give. What are you doing that's impactfully different to somebody else? Are you able to stratify your patients more effectively? Therefore, you can get a higher quality readout in phase 2A. Are you able to identify better quality drugs? So you're differentiating on quality. For example, if you're looking to treat a patient population where the current therapies leave a lot of efficacy on the table, but there's a clear biological understanding of why that might be. Do you have a differentiating strategy to address that? That could then give you sufficient excitement on the open markets to get those investments. So it's interesting you brought in that point about not even being able to do the human experiment. And so if you're not differentiated, it's really hard to get an investor excited. Well, why would I go to you? You're an unproven team if you look like a team over here that's already proven. And so that's my guidance. Make sure that what you have is clearly differentiated, that will allow you to do the crisp and clean experiment or experiments that you need to do.
Yeah. So since February, since we formed Intelligence Ventures, we've met with about 90 other VCs or angels or family offices just to share deal flow and discuss the industry. And the reoccurring theme that we see is I've talked to folks who've picked like unicorns who've done extremely well. They're at very notable VC firms. And I said, how did you know? Like, what was it that you saw? And they'll say the same thing. It was the person. I believed in them, and that was it. I've met with a lot of these companies, and sometimes they know their differentiation, but they don't convey it well. Or perhaps I see a startup that really is looking to make a quick buck and just sell it right away. I'm looking for folks who really are, again, this is the key theme of our conversation. They're focused on the patient. They're going to get it through the finish line, and they're going to do what it takes to make it happen. And that is a differentiating factor that we don't see too often. But I digress. So, switching the topic a little bit, reflecting on your career so far, Gavin, what has been your most rewarding experience in this field?
That's a huge question. I have to say, and it may not be the answer you're anticipating, it's actually the high quality teams I've had the opportunity to build and be part in my career. You can't be successful in drug discovery if you don't have highly functioning, high quality teams that pull together. And for me, I've been in situations where that's not there. It's been really hard to make forward motion. When you find yourself in an organization or with a team that's purely focused on helping patients and work highly effectively together, you can climb mountains. You really can. And so, you know, getting to the clinic is hard. Doing that with a team that's not doesn't function effectively makes it even harder. So, from my best experiences have been really working with high quality teams to focus on patients. And I'm very fortunate at the moment. I'm in an organization that I just kind of get out of the way of my reports and go be excellent because this is such an impactful quality team. For me, it's just a pleasure to come into work every day to know that I'm working to help patients with a team that I know that can do it.
I love that mindset. And I've spoken to, when we spoke about differentiation, a lot of times when a VC goes to raise capital, they're asked the question, how are you differentiated? What makes you different? And I always smile and say the same thing. I have a fantastic team. I'm surrounded by brilliant people who I think are way smarter than myself, who can bridge knowledge gaps. You don't have to be an expert in everything in order to be able to build a company or to discover a drug and get it to the finish line. You need to be able to identify your weaknesses and your strengths. And for your weaknesses, surround yourself with a brilliant team that can take your weakness and turn it into your team's strength. And that is how I've seen a lot of great companies formed. And I'm very grateful to have folks, including yourself, as one of our advisors, to really take things forward. So, Gavin, for our last question for this episode, what message would you like to leave our audience with, especially those aspiring to enter the field of AI in healthcare?
It's two different answers. I think it depends on when you say entering healthcare. There's a number of different ways you can conceptualize that. One is, you and your buddy are in the garage and you want to set up a new co. My advice to that group is make sure you have a vision that's differentiated to current, let alone future competition out there. Because if you're looking to start up a company and you're not differentiated and you can't get investment dollars, that makes it really challenging. So you've got to have that vision. If you're looking to join organizations that are already being successful and deep endeavors in the AI and machine learning space, my advice would be different. And that is spend time with the people. You're going to spend a lot of time with them, particularly in AI and machine learning, that you really need to be able to recognize that the team you're joining you can be an integral part of it. You get excitement from your team members. You get coaching, mentoring to help you really apply your skills. And so really making sure that you're joining a team with the right people that work for you. So every day is a pleasure. You can focus on executing on the science.
That wraps up another episode of Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare, the Intelligence Roundtable. I'm Doug Nisanoff, and I sincerely thank you for joining us today. Today's conversation with Gavin Hirst has been incredibly enlightening, diving deep into the realms of AI and its transformative impact on drug discovery. Gavin's expertise and insights remind us of the remarkable journey from a concept to a life-saving medication. It's this journey that fuels our passion in intelligence ventures. I want to extend my gratitude to all of you listening in and for tuning in. Your interest and support drives us to delve deeper into these crucial topics, shaping the future of healthcare and technology. If you found some value in our discussions and wish to stay updated on the latest developments in AI and healthcare, I encourage you to subscribe to our podcast on the Intelligence Ventures website. Your engagement and feedback are invaluable to us. For those interested in the intersection of artificial intelligence and healthcare, and keen to learning a little bit about Intelligence Ventures, our doors are always open. Whether you're a budding entrepreneur, a seasoned scientist, or someone passionate about this field, we're here to connect, collaborate, and cultivate the innovations that will define tomorrow's healthcare landscape. Once again, thank you for joining us at the Intelligence Roundtable. I'm signing off.